Should we start? Is it live now? Are we live? Okay. Good evening, everyone. This is Ashutosh. Welcome to Gate Wallah at Physics Wallah. This is Ashutosh Pandey, and I would be dealing with engineering ethics as part of your ESE Prelims exam. As you know, ESE is, I hope all of you are familiar with the nature of exam. आप सबको exam का nature और उसका breakup more or less पता होगा. Otherwise, we'll talk about it today. Fine. Imagine there are two people. Right? I'll start with one simple example. Right? मान लीजिए आप और आपका एक friend, दो लोग हैं जो एक एग्जाम या हाई स्कूल का एग्जाम दे रहे हैं फॉर एग्जाम्पल. एंड एक बच्चा है जिसको ऑलरेडी पेपर उसको मिल गया, राइट? और एक स्टूडेंट है जो बहुत मेहनत कर रहा है, ऑब्वियसली दिन रात मेहनत करके वो प्रिडिक्ट कर रहा है पेपर. ही इज ट्राइंग टू प्रिडिक्ट द पेपर समहाउ, एंड यू हैव द पेपर, राइट? एज अ गुडविल जेस्चर, फाइन. Yeah, we'll use English. Yeah, definitely. There's no problem, right? But we are trying to bring this session both in Hindi and English to an extent, right? Obviously, engineering ethics is an area where we cannot totally speak in Hindi. You know, the terms are a little complicated. But our purpose is that everybody should understand. Fine. So let's say there are two people who are preparing for an exam. One has the paper, one is working hard to write the exam well, and obviously these two people write the exam. Though your friend who has the paper, already he has got the paper from somewhere, you know, India mein to it's normal. So he, by as a goodwill gesture, right, dosti, you know, the friendship is very strong bond. So through friendship, he is trying to give you some, you know, examples, or through some indications, he is telling you that you read these topics. Fine. Somehow you accept his advice, you read the topics, you go to the exam. Fine. Obviously, after the exam, you realize that how is it possible that my friend has given me exact tip for the exam, right? Once you understand this, you ask him that, "Bhai, tumne kaise ye bataya? How did you tell me all this?" So the bigger question comes now. Should your friend who had access to paper already, should he tell you that he has the paper or not? Now, what is your opinion? Can you tell me? Any one of you who are involved? Right? Right? See, don't worry. We are here to help you. Most of the questions you will understand, right? I have been in UPSC since last 13 years with a tremendous track record of people getting selected, first of all. Also, when engineering ethics was introduced, I was, in that year, we taught thousands of students, right? And a lot of students benefited from that. So don't take it that way. We will be able to we will bring the content in such a manner, right, in a lucid manner, simple manner. उसको हम इस तरीके से आपको प्रेजेंट करेंगे जिससे आप उससे मैक्सिमम बेनिफिट डिराइव करें. ये सेशन उसी के ऊपर है कि आप कैसे, हाउ कैन यू engage and attempt and score almost 100% marks in that portion. As you know, there are 100 questions, and every year almost 8 to 12, right? Last 2 years, 23, 24, you will see 10 questions have been coming from engineering ethics. So this session will help you understand, right, the basic idea about engineering ethics and how we are going to teach you, what we are going to teach you, हम आपको कैसे पढ़ाएंगे, क्या पढ़ाएंगे, और क्या मेथड होगा उसको समझने का. So that even because your technical part may be very strong, but yes, where you lose marks is the portion, right, where competition is very high. Right? In technical, most of you will come at par with each other. आप सब एक बराबर होंगे almost. लेकिन जहाँ पे actual competition होगा, that will be the general studies part, the non-tech part. The non-tech part is generally neglected by the students. That is also a big problem, right? Plus UPSC, as you know, is unpredictable service commission. So how can we make that predictable? That is our target. Fine. So please don't worry. Right. Now you give me your opinion, right? Whether your friend should tell you or not that he has access to paper. Now this is the fundamental, this is the biggest issue when we think of human action. जहाँ भी humans को decision लेना होता है, right? Wherever the humans have to take a decision, they are always impacted by, confronted by, right? Or use a typical word in Hindi, duvidha, right? They always have a dilemma of making decision. Now, engineering ethics, or if I just cover this part, right? Ethics is an area which helps us understand how to make best or right, or let's say moral decisions in whatever profession we are, right? Whether we are engineers, doctors, whatever we are. Obviously most of us are engineers, right? You are preparing for that exam, so your conduct, your professional behavior, right? कैसे आप अपने वर्क प्लेस पे, अपने ऑर्गेनाइजेशन में, at the position you are, the authority you have, how are you going to make correct choices? Most of you will say that choices are made based on efficiency. Choices are made, जो जितना efficient है वो better choice है. Choices are made on need, जो need है, right? उसके basis पे choice make कर सकते हैं. या choices are made on basically the law, जो law है, जो legal है, उस पे decisions लेना है. या choices are based on empathy, sympathy, right? अगर आपको किसी पे दया आती है तो आप वो choice ले लेते हैं, किसी की मदद होती है आप वो choice ले लेते हैं, right? Now, so there are several criteria, बहुत सारे criteria है जिस पे choices लिए जा सकते हैं. Now, ethics is an area which helps you understand that which of the choices would be correct, which of the choices would be not only legal but also moral. Now, this is the entire domain of study of ethics, right? You can keep commenting if you want, you can keep asking something, I'll try to answer that, right? So this area, this portion basically deals with first this basic understanding that as engineers, as people who are working on organizations, right, how are we going to make good choices, right? Obviously, good choices, like I said, based on various parameters. Fine, come to the second part now. Obviously, we human beings cannot make choices, correct choices all the time. Fine, though we have to always make such choices, right, which justify our action. हम ऐसे choices लेना चाहते हैं जो हमारे actions को justify करे. Or we have the ground, we always try to have the ground, we always try to prove what choices we have made. Fine. So this entire complexity, ये जो complexity है, दुविधा है, this dilemma is there while humans are acting in any position, in any organization. That complex situation is simplified by the study of ethics. When you add engineering to this part, ethics, right? अभी तो ethics है, तो ethics एक broad field है. But when you add engineering to that part, right? Do you enhance it or you reduce it? आप इस field of study को broad करते हैं या narrow करते हैं? Now, can you tell me, anybody? Then what do? Do you broaden the area, or you narrow the area? So when you add engineering to this ethics part, you define it, you narrow the area. You are talking about a profession, you are talking about a sector, and not ethics in general. Obviously, civil servants, police officers, judges, politicians, technocrats like you, engineers, they all make decisions, right? They all make choices. Their decisions impact the larger society. So, one, as we add engineering to this ethics, it narrows down the area of study. Secondly, when you talk about engineering ethics, you have two options. One, public, other, private. That is where the focus of study is. Is it government or non-government or private sector? In both these sectors, the level of responsibility, जो engineers दोनों sectors में काम करते हैं, they have some common, some fundamental rules, some fundamental duty they have. Apart from that, when they are working in these two different sectors, right, government या private, जब ये दो sectors में divide होता है, obviously the level of accountability या responsibility change हो जाती है. जैसे कि एक engineer who is working with PWD or CPWD or Central Water Commission or any other government organization, right, border roads organization or whatever, when he makes a decision, he impacts lakhs of lives. Whereas person who is manufacturing an iPhone or let's say an Android phone, right, he may also impact a lot of people, but they are mostly customers. वो customers हैं, right? तो government में जब engineers काम करते हैं, तो वो एक public servant की तरह काम करते हैं. But when they are working in the private sector, they are working purely like a professional employee. So there is a big difference between the basis of evaluation. For example, your Bhopal gas tragedy, if you have read about it, right? A minor mistake, lack of corrective measures, timely remedy नहीं लिया गया, right? Ignore किया गया बहुत छोटी सी चीज को, and because of that disaster takes place, right? Or Chernobyl disaster, or recently many of the natural disasters also you have seen, right? Many of them have been triggered, they have been enhanced by human activity. So all those people who are involved in, right, government sector or those who are involved in private sector, both have huge impact on the lives of people, but the magnitude, scope, right, and the depth of impact will vary. And this is also becomes, or this also becomes an important discussion part of engineering ethics. Now, let me give you some basic facts, right? Generally, if you see your papers, right, I have not made a chart, sometimes it becomes boring. So when you see the question paper, right, you will find 10 to 12 or in general 8 to 15 questions coming from engineering ethics, right? Obviously, very important aspect is to find out, most important aspect is to find out that what is the scope of these questions. As you know, UPSC exam, right? Also, general studies is a focus. So it is obvious that the nature of questions will be little tricky, right? This is where we will come. We all have come together to give you a very strong foundation for that portion of the exam, right, which is highly unpredictable. So if I ask you that, okay, your engineering subjects, right, we can more or less predict that these are the important areas from which questions will come. But when it comes to current affairs or engineering ethics or maybe other areas, right, they do not have a very predictable nature. And that is why it becomes very important to conceptually understand things, right? Concept key focus. So when you get these 10 to 12 questions, right, you can almost attempt and score all of them. I've seen some person or a student commenting that, okay, fine, that I was not able to solve any question, right? Right. It was why I will come to the idea. Simple. Because concept, right? So it's like remembering all the parts of a rocket, right? आप सब जानते होंगे rocket क्या है? सारे rocket के parts आपको याद हैं, fine? लेकिन आपको propulsion system नहीं पता, right? Now see, हर चीज के लिए पीछे एक basic concept होता है. वो basic concept आप ये समझिए कि that is the learning mode, right? The learning, what you can say, cell of that particular knowledge. अगर सेल या बिल्डिंग ब्लॉक नहीं होगा तो ऑब्वियसली मोस्ट ऑफ द नॉलेज विल बी सुपरफिशियल, इट विल बी विदाउट अ फाउंडेशन, दिस विल बी द ड्रॉबैक. तो आपके एफर्ट वो वेस्ट हो, राइट? सो if you study or carefully you look into the question papers, right, let's say you take up 4 to 5 years question papers, right, that will help you understand all of that. Don't worry, right? We are just starting with these sessions. Over the time you will come to know a lot of things in detail, right? You will become a pro, right? I would say a professional in this area, right? But it is obvious that you will have to work little hard, right? For that, for the same purpose we are here, right? Feel free to ask whenever, whatever you want. Now see, if you take these papers, you'll find out, right, that there is a certain scope of the question, the way they are asked, right? In our Telegram channel also for PW or for GATE, we are putting up regular certain questions, right? Those who want to practice, they can also go there and try to attempt those questions, right? So you see, that nature of questions, how they come. So if we are thorough with certain kinds of topics, certain basic definitions, right? I'm going to write it now, that what exactly you need. See, if you understand basic concepts, right? By concepts, I mean that if you have 12 questions or 15 questions or 10 questions to solve, 6 questions, that is 60% of the part of the engineering ethics can be solved only through concepts, or you can simply say vocabulary. So if you know the vocabulary, that is a very simple part, right? You just have to understand the vocabulary, or I would say the key concept and uska application. Simple. If you're able to just understand those terms, let's say 30 terms, 40 terms, 50 terms maximum. So your 6 questions out of 10 or 8 out of 12 more or less will be around those key vocabulary, which most of these students neglect, because obviously you are more concerned about covering something more in detail, right? But you neglect the fine aspect. The finer aspect क्या है? There's a very famous saying, devil is in the details. तो उस devil को समझने के लिए आपको details को समझना पड़ेगा, right? So let us say key concepts. अब key concepts क्या है? These are certain terms which are essential for anyone to understand ethics, right? Or professional ethics or engineering ethics. So anybody who knows these terms, जिसको आप theoretical principles बोलो, theories बोलो, anything you say, but if you know these 20, 30, 40 terms, right, your 60% marks are assured. Now that is a strategy, right? It's not about knowing everything. Nobody can know everything. But yes, whatever we know it so perfectly well, so strategically well, that whatever we attempt is going to be correct. Fine. Now see, so vocabulary, this is a very integral part, right? Most of the students neglect. They try to memorize the definition, but they don't want to understand it, right? So we will work on that. First thing, basic concepts, right? Then there are some scholars. Fine. They are equally important. There are some scholars. These scholars are recurrent. अब two types of scholars हैं, जो general ethics के scholars हैं, who have given the basic principles and concepts of ethics, and there are certain scholars which are important for your engineering sector. Fine. तो ये दोनों में influential हैं. So obviously we are going to find out those common scholars, right, which are beneficial for general type of questions and for engineering type of questions, right? So these scholars, right, not necessarily Plato या Socrates, ये सब बहुत philosophical scholars हैं, but बहुत सारे contemporary practical scholars, right? Like for example Rawls. If you see the nature of now engineering ethics, right, और questions आप उसमें देखेंगे तो you will realize कि they are going between the lines, right? For an engineer, obviously I know most of you know what is between the lines, right? सिर्फ formula पढ़ने से engineering नहीं आती, right? So that you know already, right? Me also being an engineer and a UPSC mentor, so I know that both we also encounter problems when we start studying for descriptive exam like UPSC, right? तो सिर्फ formula से obviously हम question solve नहीं कर सकते, right? So same logic यहाँ पे है that between the lines आपको पढ़ना है, right? उसके लिए सबसे पहला step है vocabulary. If you're thorough with this, you can understand, interpret, analyze most of the content, right? So you don't have to worry, right? Because we are going to do this in the class, right? Scholars like Rawls, right? John Stuart Mills, right? Or for that matter, let's take our own, the Gandhian philosophy, right? And several other scholars are there, right? Now these scholars we have to zero down to, we cannot read all the scholars, that is waste of time. We have to zero down to certain scholars, right, as per the logic of the exam. So we'll try to now zero down to those scholars, which will again give you at least 2 to 3 marks. Now see, so 60%, the rest 20% we can do through these scholars, right? Then you have questions which are based on, see, interpretation. अब नेक्स्ट जो 20% है वो इंटरप्रिटेशन है और फैक्ट्स. फैक्ट्स फॉर एग्जांपल कोड ऑफ एथिक्स फॉर इंजीनियर्स, प्रोफेशनल कोड फॉर इंजीनियर्स, American Society for Mechanical Engineers क्या है, ASME code, ये code, वो code, see, civil engineers code. So there are different type of codes of ethics or professional codes which have been designed for people in engineering profession, right? Let me give you a simple example. जैसे famous tap leak theory है, right? Tap leak theory, let's say, how many of you have seen a leaking tap? Fine. How many of you have seen leaking tap? Leaking tap के दो मीनिंग हो सकते हैं, right? One तो leaking tap आप देखते हो, right? So wherever you go, obviously Delhi में पानी was a big issue. It's a big issue, election issue, right? Water is a big issue, more or less most of the countries, especially in the Asian region, right? Tap leak एक problem है. Tap leak problem means you go every day to your office and you watch there is a public tap, right? Public tap means government ने उसको install किया, and you see small droplets of water falling from it, right? They are leaking from it. Simple, eh? You can change the washer, you can put the spindle, the thread, right? Or you can do something, right? As civil engineers, you are more aware, right? So let's say there's a tap leak. Every day you observe it, fine, and you see few droplets of water falling, and you go, right? Now imagine one day you sit the entire day and you observe how much water goes out of this tap, even though it is leaking drop by drop, only drop by drop. When you calculate this drop by drop, fine, you'll find obviously in a month you would have, or that leaking tap had wasted, right, thousands of liters of water, which could have saved, which could have provided benefit to many households. And maybe, right, a party would have won the elections, right, also, right? But let's say, so अब ये क्या है? Small, very minor, casual, insignificant impact, right? But over the time, this small, insignificant thing has a bigger impact, right? The same applies to engineers. If engineers, while designing something, ignore a very small aspect of safety, right? But in the cumulative impact, that aspect of safety has huge impact, right? Now see, that's a tap leak problem. So if you ignore small corruption, right, over the time, you might have seen, you might have gone to the shops, right? उनके पास अब बहुत सारे shops पे आप गए, you have bought something for 99 rupees. Now that person doesn't give you 1 rupee back. 1 rupee, 1 rupee, 1 rupee. I don't need to tell you, right? You can multiply it and find out, right? So how many SIPs that person can start with that 1 rupee? So imagine small, insignificant neglection or neglect may lead to disastrous consequences. Fine. ये example था interpretation का. See? So whenever you get certain questions, or 1 or 2 questions you'll get on interpretation, like you say case study, or assertion reasoning, case study, right? A situation, and then you have to find out the option, best option in the situation, right? What will you do? What choice will you make, right? Should you go ahead with a particular decision because your company wants it, or should you go ahead with a particular decision because you feel that is the right thing to do? This relates to what? This relates to something called moral dilemma. Moral dilemma. Making choices, right? A judge whose son comes in his court, right, accused of doing an accident, right, committing an accident, committing a scam. Obviously, the judge should not be there, right? He should have taken a leave from that case, right? But let's imagine, will that judge be totally fair or biased or unbiased? Obviously, that judge would or may be fair. He might follow all the procedures and the laws, right? Still, there will always be a doubt. This doubt results in moral dilemmas. So whenever we are in a situation where आगे कुआं पीछे खाई, right, you have this kind of problem, fine, you definitely have to make choices. Sometimes your choices may not lead to good, but they may lead to less bad and more bad. So this type of questions come and they are more interpretation based, fine, but they can also be easily understood. वो भी हम बहुत easily समझ सकते हैं. कैसे? अगर हम इसको, if we focus on this, Fine. And then obviously some questions, like I said, these 20% questions will come from a mix of interpretation and facts. Facts, like I told you, there are a lot of factual things, right? There are a lot of things which are happening around you, right? Even in your current affairs, there are a lot of things which are happening. Let's say government RTI Act लाती है, government एक whistleblowers protection act लाती है, right? या government regulatory bodies create करती है private sector को control करने के लिए. Recently, you might have seen the problem with SEBI, right? Regulation with SEBI, RBI. There are a lot of issues. Competition Commission of India. बहुत सारे ऐसे organizations हैं which government has created for regulating the private sector, for protecting the consumers' interests, right? Even coachings were impacted by the Consumer Protection Authority, right? You know that. So it is obvious that there are a lot of facts also which we need to know, right? Though, like I said, again, we will try to reduce it as per the importance in the exam. So all in all, if we are able to understand concepts, obviously focus on certain scholars, understand some interpretation, and focus on certain facts, your most of the work is done. You can score completely, right? 10 out of 10 or 12 out of 12 or 8 out of 8 questions in the examination, and this will be a big edge for you, because this is an area, right, where many of these students will falter. There is a gap because they may not have good content, they may not have good understanding, they may not even have, you can say, a good very basic understanding of the subject called ethics. Fine. So we will plan the lectures, we have designed everything from that perspective. Then questions, obviously you need to do questions. The more questions you do, the better understanding will develop, whether it is PYQ or the prospective questions that you have to keep practicing so that जो भी basic drawbacks हैं, doubts हैं, right, simple dilemmas जो हैं आपके preparation में वो खत्म हो सके. Fine. Then obviously, like we said, interlinked way में we have to understand, right? कुछ current developments हैं वो भी यहाँ पे visible हो सकते हैं, right? And they will be, right? UPSC is such an exam, you know, that they always keep doing some experiment, one or the other, right? Fine. And now you have IRMS exam also, IRMS service also now included, the tech part included in the engineering services, right? So obviously a huge scope is emerging for good students. Fine. So if we follow this pattern, right, we can score completely. Right. Now, let me give you a very basic idea. See, so if we look at the basic approach of study, fine. So सबसे basic है ये समझना what is engineering ethics. Like I told you, there is an area called ethics and there is an area called engineering ethics. We'll deal with all these topics in our subsequent videos, right? Why it is important for engineers? Because engineers can make a big impact, public ho, private ho, right? They have a huge role to play. You have seen Oppenheimer. You can make out, right, what scientists and engineers can do to the humanity, to the entire civilization. Fine, you can wipe off the entire civilization, right? Significance of engineering ethics, like I said, right? We are going to be in positions of power, authority. आप ऐसी positions पे होंगे जहाँ पे आप 10,000 crores and crores of projects you must be leading, right? Your one decision, one suggestion can make or impact the entire, right? Your entire policy of the government, right, may fail because of your one wrong suggestion. Fine. So you see what value it has, right? Plus, UPSC gives a lot of emphasis on these areas because the way they have introduced these areas, right? 8 years, it's been 8 years now in UPSC IS exam also they introduced the areas. Why? Because they are now specifically focusing on something which we call as emotional intelligence. Not just IQ, but EQ, right? We'll talk about all these things when we do in the class, right? Some students have said, okay, 7 days. See, we have 2.5 hours of class, right? We'll try to make it crisp, very comprehensive, fine? And anybody, right, who does not know anything or XYZ about it will be able to understand, right? So don't worry, we have a method, right? Prakash, we have a methodology, we'll follow that and you are going to benefit from it, don't worry, right? That is up to us, you leave it to us, right? We are experts of that, let us handle that, right? Good. So now see, so general aspect of syllabus, ethics and values in engineering profession, right? Obviously, what kind of ethics, what kind of principles we follow while we are, conducting our engineering profession. Professional ethics, obviously, engineers in different sectors, what bounds them, what binds them, what restricts them from making certain decisions, or what forces them to make certain decisions. Fine. Governance issues, obviously, like I told you, you are to be involved in the government. Government has a big impact on everything that is being done. Right? Code of conduct, these are the laws, the rules which govern the professions like engineers or bureaucrats and public servants, right? तो जो भी public servants हैं, government servants हैं, उनको ये rules fine already bind करते हैं, right? And why these rules are made and what is the nature of these rules, ये भी we'll try to understand. Fine, but ये legal है, right? Corporate social responsibility, if you see today emerging, private sector's role is emerging, it is very powerful role, and private sector also has to follow some moral guidelines. They also have to contribute to public interest. तो समाज के इंटरेस्ट में सोशल डेवलपमेंट के लिए प्राइवेट सेक्टर का भी पार्टिसिपेशन उतना ही इंपॉर्टेंट है. क्यों? बिकॉज दे आर यूजिंग पब्लिक रिसोर्स, राइट? वाटर, फॉरेस्ट, लैंड एंड सिटीजन्स जो है वो भी कस्टमर्स हैं. So वो सारे resources वो भी use कर रहे हैं. Their obligation should also be enforced. So we'll talk about these things. Fine. Environmental ethics, as you know, sustainable development goals इस समय priority है governments की, right? United Nations SDG, if you know, we'll talk about that also. In current affairs, you will talk about it. In environment, you will talk about it, right? So environmental ethics is the emerging area, right? Ethical dilemmas, like I told you, bureaucrats are, right, impacted by choices. तो वो कैसे choices लेते हैं, कैसे उन choices को वो better बना सकते हैं, right? And likewise. Case studies, you have to be put into situations, right? We'll look into situations, आप कैसे situations में हैं और इन situations पे best decisions क्या हो सकते हैं. What principles you will use to come out of such complex situations, right? A lot of questions are also based on that. Fine. Then basic concepts, we'll study definition of ethics, ethics and morality, engineering as profession, and social responsibility. We have talked about these things. Type of ethics है, personal है, professional है, business है, right? You and your friend, personal ethics, right? You and your boss, professional ethics. You and customer is business ethics, right? Or you and other business, business ethics. You and competitor, business ethics, right? So we'll talk about this. फिर ethical theories हैं कुछ, right? We'll talk about, like I told you, scholars और उनके कुछ contributions, very important. Fine. So we'll take detailed discussions on these various things. Today was an introduction session, which I was supposed to take a little earlier, but due to some engagements and my technical absence, right? So I think we have been able to give you a general insight. आपको एक general framework मैंने आज दिया है, right? इसकी details में हम जाएंगे. We'll conduct the classes, right? Almost 2.5 hours classes, right? And we can say yes, around 20-25 hours we'll try to fit in your entire, because we don't want to burden you with unnecessary content. First, secondly, understanding should be so strong that any question that you see in the exam you are able to do it, right? Sometimes it's more important to develop the capability than just acquiring the information, right? तो capability ऐसी develop हो आपकी कि information कैसा भी पूछा जाए, आपका जो sense of understanding है subject का वो बहुत strong होगा. Fine, जिसको आप engineering में बोलते हो rules of thumb, right? तो engineering में आप follow करते हो rules of thumb, right? Same way there are rules of thumb of attempting the exams, right? So we'll teach you, we'll tell you all that, how to interpret a question. एक guess भी आप कैसे अच्छे से मार सकते हो, right? तभी मार सकते हो जब आपने preparation अच्छे से की हो. Fine. So we'll take the classes, then practice questions will be there, prospective questions will be there, PYQs will be there. So we'll deal with a lot of things. Fine. We'll try to give you a comprehensive knowledge in the class itself, and those will be sufficient for any paper or practice question that you will do, right? So anybody who goes through these classes, right, with sincerity and obviously with an effort, with responsibility, right, and who engages with us, जो हमसे frequently engage रहे, right, questions and doubts and बिल्कुल पूछिए, right, there is no restriction on that, they will definitely benefit from it, right? So I hope, thank you all of you for your presence, right, and obviously for your participation both, right? This was just a preliminary session, right, so that at least I can and we can know each other, right? though many of the UPSC aspirants would be knowing me in that sense, fine, but still it feels good to interact with the bright minds of this country, right? Those who are aspiring to be the top positions in this country. And obviously they have a burning desire, right, to bring some transformation. Fine, so thank you. Keep engaged, right? Keep interacting with us. Whatever your doubts are, we'll definitely solve it, right? Thank you so much. All the best to you. We'll meet again in the next session, right? All the technical details you can access from the office, right? Or you can contact the desired person. They'll give you all the details. Anyway, a lot of videos have already been made on the nature of classes, right? Fees, curriculum, whatever is there, right? So thank you so much. See you again. All the best.